As you've seen in a previous animation, it's important to make multiple recommendations and then value between those recommendations. This allows you to get the highest diversity of thought, the best narrowing down to key elements, and where possible, creating hybrids of your ideas so that you give the most value to the company that you're doing a project for. Now, most students know how to come up with multiple ideas, but then how do you value all these ideas? How do you make decisions about which ones are going to be best and which ones you should be working with? So I'm going to talk about two different approaches. One of these is best when you're able to measure the change in revenue, the change in profit, the change in costs, based upon the different recommendations you're making, and you're able to make some kind of a dollar estimation of the impact of one recommendation over another. One of the best ways to do this is what we call an efficient frontier. Now, in an efficient frontier, we're going to be looking at the value that's created by the idea. And this could be an NPV number, a net present value. It could be total dollars. But it's some measure of the change in value that's created by the project. On the x-axis, we're looking here at what are the costs, the capital that need to be invested to create this value. Now, on an efficient frontier grid, there is always a best point, the corner that you want to be looking for. So if we're going from low value to high value, and we're going from low investment or cost to high investment or cost, which is the best corner? Where would the best possible recommendation be? Well, if I could have zero cost and infinite value created, then we call this the efficient frontier or the maximizing corner. This is where it would be absolutely best. If I could come up with an idea that had infinite value at zero cost, that would be my best recommendation. All right. So now what I do is I take each one of my recommendations and I begin looking for options that I take the recommendation and I figure out for recommendation A, it's going to cost me this much, but it's only going to give me this much value. Now, option B is going to cost me a lot more and sadly not give me a lot more value. Option C, on the other hand, is only going to cost a little bit more than A, but it gives a lot of value. And D is going to cost me even more than B, but it's going to give me a lot of value. All right. Now, to do an efficient frontier, here's the next step. You're going to take and create an efficient frontier line. So we're going to look at this corner, and we're going to look at the items that are closest. Now, there's actually, in this case, I could do two efficient frontiers. I could do this one and that one. Now, they're not very different, but this one is looking more at a value drive, and this one's looking more at a cost drive. And what I'm looking for is bang for the buck. For each extra dollar I spend, how much more value do I create? And for each extra dollar that I spend, how much more value? So the slope of this efficient frontier is a measurement of the bang for the buck. How much more value do I create for the money that I'm investing? So I have now calculated the cost for each of the four options that we were considering, and I've developed some measurement of future revenues or future profits or dollar savings and I've got a value for that recommendation. Now, based upon this, you can look at this and say, well, you know, there's a lot of bang for C, and there's not as much bang per dollar for D. So I might say, based upon this analysis that we're doing, I might say, well, C is kind of my best. So if I have to just make a recommendation right now, I would probably say C. But if my recommendations are mutually exclusive, meaning that if I do one, I can't do, one doesn't relate in any way to the other. So if I do A, I'm not doing any of C. If I do B, I'm not doing any of D. So mutually exclusive ideas and collectively exhaustive. I've really looked at all of the different ways that I can approach this. So mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive ideas give me this valuation. But what if I added elements of A and elements of C together and came up with a, we'll call this, we're going to assume there's more of C than there is of A. So we're going to call this C prime. And C prime ends up being right there. C prime is a hybrid of C and A, which has, because I'm not spending as much as I would have on C, but I'm getting the value from A, turns out that I'm up here. I can also do a hybrid. I could do a hybrid of C and B, but let's do a hybrid of C and D, and it turns out that that one is, let's say it's right here. And that's D prime. Now, so now what I've done is I have found alternatives which are better, closer to the efficient frontier than were the previous recommendations. So these hybrid might even be able to come up with another one, which we'll call C prime D prime, or double prime. And that now is a hybrid of these two. Now when I look at the efficient frontier, that becomes the best idea. Because when I look at how much I have to spend to get that impact, and the savings I get from that, that is clearly the one that gives me the best bang for the buck of anything on the chart. So that is the decision, and that's the one I'm going to take to the company. So do you see that what we did is we had all of these ideas we originally thought of. We created hybrids and hybrids of hybrids to finally get an idea that was the most valuable idea that we could present. This is the process of taking a variety of recommendations, not fighting amongst yourself about whose idea is best, but valuing each of the ideas, then looking for ways to make them even better by taking the best elements of each idea and combining them into hybrids, and in some cases even hybrids of hybrids. This is a great way of expanding the alternatives that we're considering and measuring the value that can be created.